Welcome to Pensar Basketball. Today, we're going to be talking about the Raptors learning from the past. There's this old quote by one of my favorite authors, and he says, when things are going bad or things are going poorly, relax. You're probably learning a lot. And I think that given the Raptors have missed the playoffs a lot over the last 4 years, and they've had a lot of lumps and a lot of false starts and a lot of miscalculations and a lot of things that didn't quite work out the way they wanted it to. I figured it would be a good time with the season right around the corner for us to reflect on 10 key takeaways that the Toronto Raptors can take away. And hopefully, the next iteration of the Toronto Raptors around Grady Dick, Scotty Barnes, right? Erica's saying that's a good quote. Welcome, Erica. Welcome to all of you. Hit the like on your way in. Appreciate it very much. Yeah. So I just think that, again, it's not all bad. The vibe around this channel has been that the Raptors are in a positive position, but there's a lot to discuss here. There's also going to be a mailbag section. If you have not dropped in your mailbag question on Pensar Basketball Instagram, it is still open, and we will tackle the mailbag questions right towards the end of this. This is not going to be a long live. We have a hard out at 6:15, so let's get into it without further rambling. Okay, so we're going to start with a familiar face, Dennis Schroeder, the bad apple effect. Okay. So, the bad apple effect is based on a sociological study done in 2006, in which the theory slash old wives' tale slash there was like a quote, the that one bad apple spoils the barrel. Well, this was actually put to test. And the way that it was put to test was functional groups of five were given a dysfunctional teammate. And effectively, a sixth person would come in. And this study has been replicated across very many different platforms. And it's been done with four, with the additional of fifth, or three with the additional of a fourth. And I think we can all identify that sometimes people just have heavy energy. Sometimes people kind of come into a room or come into a circle and the conversation just sort of halts as everyone kind of just stares around and we're like, what's going on? Well, what you may not realize is that not only does the negative person who is introduced into the group have a detrimental effect while they're around, they actually tend to influence the behavior of the entire group as in itself. As in, it influences how the group communicates with each other, how things go. So, effectively, to you know to paint the picture, there's a distinction between a bad apple and a disruptive positive force, right? There are certain people who come in and they challenge the status quo. They want to make changes. They don't like how things are done, but ultimately they go about things in a respectful way. They are positive and ultimately they have the right values. They do not spoil the barrel. What the study found was that people were less functional, less happy. They reported being more mistrustful in these situations. And effectively, the opportunity was there in the beginning that if there was enough empowerment in the group itself, if the group felt empowered to do so, that they could reject the bad apple or correct the bad apple. If the group did not feel empowered to do so, i.e., it was like a university project in which you couldn't reject the fifth or sixth dysfunctional member, then eventually the group itself would start to crumble from within. And what the study found was that the introduction of good apples did not have the same effect, which is to say that if you have a functional team of five and you introduce a sixth team member that is dysfunctional or a bad apple, that person will erode the entire structure, fabric of the group. They will completely make everyone more mistrustful, not only of them, but of each other. The understanding of what makes a bad apple, which is, the first question that I had, what makes a bad apple? Someone with a lot of internal conflict, someone who does not understand where they stand or their pecking order in the grander scheme of things. And ultimately, that confusion then transfers over to the rest of the group. This is not the Lucifer effect. Effectively, it is just a matter of a person rubbing everyone the wrong way. And it makes it kind of a chore to come to work, and if you lived through the entire dysfunction that the Raptors went through for the first half of last year with, trades hanging over everyone's head, contracts hanging over everyone's head, And especially the previous year with the Fred Van Vliet saga, it seemed like a lot of really positive people suddenly didn't look very happy coming to work. And so I think this is something that the Raptors need to calculate for and understand that, yes, in years past, you had an alpha dog like a Kyle Lowry, and this shit didn't fly. If you came in and you didn't want to work, there was a very quick rejection from the entire group. Whatever it was, whether it was Dwayne Casey, whatever the group dynamic was that weeded out bad apples, the minute Kyle Lowry left, the minute some of your veteran presence left, that balance was no longer there. So that whoever came in was basically free to take over the team. We saw it with Fred, we saw it with Dennis, and ultimately, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I think this is something that the Raptors need to take forward, in my opinion. And yeah, so that's one thing. Inmates run poor asylums. Yeah, we found this out with the Stanford prison experiment, and we found this out with the Toronto Raptors that when there is a sort of vacuum, to piggyback off the last point, when there is a vacuum that can be filled, a leadership void, a dominant presence, one will rise. And it may not always be the one that you want. And I found too often, and we're going to lump two and three, which is keep the main thing the main thing. I found too often that there was a lacking on the assertion of values for this team, right? For a very long time under Kyle Lowry and under Dwayne Casey, it was work, get better, develop, win games, win playoffs, win championships, advance better than the year before. And sure, it didn't always work. Sometimes you get swept by the Wizards in the opening round and suddenly everyone's on the table. And sometimes you have a disastrous signing like DeMar Carroll, and sometimes you have a little bit of infighting, and sometimes you have a media war and all that stuff. But generally speaking, it felt like the group was trending up, right? And then we had Nick Nurse come in, and suddenly everything became about contracts. And he's spoken about it many times that some of the internal motivation from him to get guys paid was how can we turn you from a six man to a starter? How can we get you paid like an all star, etc. And so sometimes it almost felt like that became the motivation, and I don't necessarily think that that was to the betterment of the group. The fourth thing, and I think that this is a biggie, which is superstars are seldom made. The Toronto Raptors have never made a superstar. It's never happened. Tried three times, failed all three times. The first time it was with Chris Bosh, and you had exactly three playoff wins in his entire Raptors tenure, which lasted, if I'm not mistaken, 6 years, 7 years. Three playoff wins. That sucks. That really sucked. And tried again with DeMar DeRozan. Didn't quite work. Tariq is one step ahead of me, saying Bosch, DeMar, and Siakam. And then you tried again. And I could say all three of them presented some very good things, right? With DeMar, right? There was a cultural aspect. With Siakam, it was the accolades. His resume is really impressive. Two All NBAs, right? You got the two All NBAs. He had a bag. He got better every year. It was a rags to riches story because he started late. It was all great, but there was never that. Is he a top 10 player? Has that question ever been broached? That question has only ever been broached for two Raptors ever. Okay. It was broached with Vince Carter in 2000, 2001, and it was broached with Kawhi Leonard. And really, at the time the question was broached, it wasn't really much of a question because both guys were effectively that good. And it was that player. And, you could say with Vince, he didn't have the supporting cast, right? Try this on for size. What if Vince Carter in 2000, 2001 had Allen Iverson supporting cast, the much maligned, shit on supporting cast of Aaron McKee, Jumaine Jones, right? Tyrone Hill, Dikembe Mutombo, Eric Snow, that team, that defensive unit around him, could Vince Carter have single-handedly carried a team to the finals? certainly would have had a much better chance of doing it than DeMar DeRozan, Chris Bosh, or Pascal Siakam. And that's the gap, really. That's really what it is. That's what it is. And with Kawhi Leonard, of course, the supporting cast of all supporting casts, right? Everyone says it's just Kawhi alone, but it wasn't. The truth is, you need both. Nikola Jokic is the best player in the world. And with Jamal Murray's current extension, Aaron Gordon's pending extension, Michael Porter Jr. not turning into the superstar they were hoping for, Bruce Brown out the door, KCP out the door, the young guys not developing. It'd be very hard to believe that even the best player in the world is going to be sniffing a championship anytime soon. Hurts me to say that, but it's true because you need more. But that first thing has to be the first thing, and that is the thing. And if you are hoping to win championships or compete for championships without that superstar, it's like 1 in 50, right? If you go through NBA history, there just aren't a lot of teams that have ever even sniffed an NBA finals without that type of player. So you can point to the exceptions all you want, but the truth is, when it comes down to it, you need that guy. Siakam wasn't it. Paying guys who are not that guy like they are that guy is how you end up in the treadmill, how you end up in cap and flexibility. And hell, I don't know if the Indiana Pacers have that guy in Tyrese Halliburton. I very much doubt it. I know they don't have that guy in Pascal Siakam. So what do they have? They have a window for the next 2 to 3 years to be competitive in the East. But if you want to be standing, you want to be the last team standing, you're going to have one of those main guys. And hopefully for the Raptors, and I certainly believe this, Scotty Barnes is that guy. I think he's going to morph quickly into one of the top 5 or 6 players in the Eastern Conference, and hopefully at some point he'll be one of the top 4 or 5 players in the NBA. And at that point, it'll just depend on what you have around him and a little bit of luck, but at least you have that first pillar down. So I think that the Raptors would be wise to learn from the first 3 times that they tried this. You cannot you can't make a superstar. They're kind of born. Okay, let's go to the next one. The law of diminishing returns. Oh man, how many places does this apply for the Toronto Raptors? Blake Murphy had a lot of articles this past year about flexibility. He's talked about it endlessly, where he said the Raptors have this thing about pushing flexibility down. You know, they did it with Bruce Brown. They do it with various contracts. They do it with Fred Van Vliet, OG Anunoby, etc. We have the flexibility. We have these short-term contracts, but then at some point you hit a wall and you lose that flexibility. Not necessarily the only place where the law of diminishing returns can be applied. So, first of all, what is the law of diminishing returns? Well, the very correct definition of it, it's an economic term that says that if you keep increasing one factor in the production of your goods, which in this case would be team success, wins, while keeping all other factors the same, you'll reach a point beyond which additional increases will result in a progressive decline in output. Okay. Where else could this potentially be useful or applicable for the Toronto Raptors? I don't know. Vision 6-9, maybe. At some point, you have taken what was effectively a fever dream born of watching Rudy Gay for Masai Ujiri on the court and saying, wouldn't it be nice if all our players kind of had these physical dimensions? Well, sure, sort of, but not really. Not if you reverse engineer it, not if one of those players is Stanley Johnson, not if the other one is Bo Cruz and the other one is Yuta Watanabe, right? There's sort of an element of these guys just kind of getting in each other's way. There was an element of too many overlapping weaknesses, right? Not enough shooting, not enough size. And then you take one of the biggest plays in the NBA, which is the pick and roll, and how often offensively does that sort of rendered useless when all your players kind of are the same? Well, you know, it's a nice little gimmick for a little bit. What about the law of diminishing returns as it pertains to the possession rigging that the Nick Nurse era Raptors tried to do, right? So I think at some point you need balance, right? You need to shit test. And perhaps there is an element of other people catching up to your trade secrets here as well, right? The Toronto Raptors were fantastic. They scouted a certain type of player, they scout certain territories, they have a particular draft style or a draft philosophy. But what happens when the rest of the league catches up? Not to even mention the brain drain that happens when you are successful, right? This is sort of not, I'm not even sure if this necessarily applies to the law of diminishing returns, but it certainly is the cost of success, right? Where as you are more successful, your players become harder to retain because they are inexplicably tied to the success, and success is rewarded. So you have a player like KCP, and he goes to Orlando not as some role player or Jokic merchant. He goes as a winning player, he goes as a champion. But of course, right? Will he be the KCP with Paolo Banchero that he was with Nikola Jokic? No, he won't be, but he'll be paid like he would be. And that's sort of like the old Gilbert Arenas quote, which is, "You're not paying me for the player I'm going to be. You're paying me for the player I was." And that's an unfortunate thing of NBA contracts, but very often that is exactly what happens. So I think this is a law worth paying attention to. Okay, the next one would be 82 wins plus 5,000 victories. Talked a lot about the winner effect in a live, talked about it in a follow up live, talk about it again. Honestly, I think that winning is very important for young teams, old teams, organizations in general. You need wins, it's good for morale. But there are so many other victories. And if you can channel those victories in a productive way, then there's a lot to get from even a losing season that is, considered a losing season. Because again, I ask you the question, what would you rather have? Would you rather have the Raptors win 41 games this year and they pretty much play Bruce Brown 35 minutes, Jakob Poeltl 35 minutes for 82 games. They do not play any of their young guys at all. They make some panicky win now type of, deal for some veterans. Kelly Olynyk plays a bunch of minutes and Scotty Barnes pretty much stagnates. Emmanuel quickly stagnates. RJ Barrett stagnates. They don't get enough reps to do okay, clearly. Or would you rather win 31 games and none of that is true? Scotty Barnes ascends, RJ Barrett expands his package, becomes better, is put into uncomfortable positions, even if it costs some losses. Ulrich Champche and Jonathan Mobo and Jacoby Walter and Grady Dick all get minutes, meaningful reps, win games count, and are allowed to fail. I think most of us, sensible enough, would probably take the 31 win season. So clearly, wins and losses are not everything. And this is not the loser's swan song. This is not me, saying this is not me moving the bench, moving the goalposts and saying, well, I know the Raptors are going to lose a lot of games, so let me just stop caring about winning. It's never been about winning. It's never been about winning. It's been about winning. You know what I mean? It's not about winning the day. It's about winning the decade. It's about ascending properly. It's about developing properly. It's about sustainable practices. It's about retaining your assets and your flexibility, but not to your detriment. It's about building something that's coherent and fun to watch, but also sustainable and future proof, right? It's not about leveraging all of your flexibility for a 34-year-old guard who might get you like two extra wins. There's a balance here. This is not purely art or science. This is basketball. So I do think that there are a lot of little victories within the big victories. Maybe those little victories are that a player who is infamous for being a poor ball handler becomes a better ball handler. Or maybe a big who has never taken a three pointer or has taken very few three pointers suddenly becomes a half decent volume three-point shooter. Or maybe it is something like a player who's had massive question marks defensively steps up and guards the best player every single night. I'm looking at you, RJ Barrett, and becomes marginally better as a point of attack defender, even if it results in more losses. That there is real growth and real development. So, again, don't live and die by the losses. Wins feel nice, But what if I think there's a law that I'm going to talk about that's going to completely talk about what I'm talking about here in a better way. Let's continue to move forward. Another law, or pick a lane. This is a lesson I think the Raptors need to learn. The minute they drafted Scotty Barnes, everything should have been shifted onto his timeline. But of course, there were the powers that be, MLSC, right? How could you? Blah, blah, blah. Now, of course, they held him out of Kevin Durant trade talks. They did not trade him. They did not give up on him after a rough second year. But I do think that it's worth noting that if they could do it over again, given how much his development stagnated in year two, given how much we know about the crucial years of development of basketball, do you think they would have done it differently? Had they been able to see the ending? And of course, hindsight 2020, you couldn't have seen the ending. But had you potentially known the type of third year Scotty was going to have, could you have potentially seen them pulling the plug on that core a little bit sooner, salvaging some assets, moving to a younger timeline, and maybe you're in a very different position today. You don't give up your San Antonio pick. Maybe you tanked earlier. Maybe you would have had a chance at someone like a Chet Holmgren the very next year. Who knows? My point is, I think this two timeline thing of we're just going to kind of grandfather this guy in and we're going to keep rolling with the championship core. I think it just comes down to understanding that the main thing is the main thing, that one of these players is of 100 times greater consequence than the others, and trusting your gut. Far too often, I feel like I think we can all relate to this where we kind of wish we trusted our gut a little bit more. Now, none of us have the professional acumen or accolades as a Masai Ujiri. Masai Ujiri saw something in this guy, is the same guy who saw something in Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, same guy who saw something in Giannis Antetokounmpo. I feel like Masai Ujiri is a great evaluator of talent, and he saw something in this guy that was worth holding him off for Kevin Durant. And I think that if you have that level of faith in a player as a rookie, that's probably a good indication that you should build the whole thing around him sooner. And I understand that the Raptors had this sort of like philosophy, and I think maybe this should introduce another rule, which is what's good for the goose is not good for the gander. Is that the quote? It just basically means that all rules do not apply to the all rules do not apply equally, and this was one of my biggest, beefs really with this whole, treating Scotty like, we're talking about a McDonald's All-American, we're talking about a Team USA guy, we're talking about a guy who is a five-star recruit. You can't treat him like OG Anunoby. You can't treat him like Pascal Siakam. He's not those guys, and his development had to be different. And I just feel like trying to treat him like those guys might have backfired. So, you hand the reins of the franchise to a top four, top five pick. I understand some top four, top five picks are not built equal. I get that. But the sooner you could flex that imagination and get him, with the ball in his hands, starting to imagine, even if it was ugly, I think you had to do it. And I understand this notion of trying to shield him from the expectations, trying to, blunt that sort of jump from, okay, we're championships to, oh my God, we're lottery picks and this is our guy and this is the guy. But I hope that, to those in the city who feel like we compromised a championship core in order to build around this guy, I hope that you'll understand that the championship core left a long time ago. And this is the guy who's going to get you to the next one. So, yeah. And I don't think they do that Jakob Poeltl trade at all if they knew that this is, whose timeline they were on. True Tuesday equals false Friday. I think what I'm trying to say with this lesson is that things are true until they're not, right? I mean, Precious Achiuwa, I think most of us could agree, when the Miami Heat traded him to the Toronto Raptors, that there was a considerable amount of upside. But then we saw year after year of stagnation, same mistakes over and over. And I think we pretty much sold him at his lowest point. He was basically a toss in that deal. And I understand that now he's back with the New York Knicks and he's cushioning some of the blow of losing Isaiah Hartenstein, but not really. And I think it was pretty obvious that after he had that playoff series and then he kind of came out the next year and there wasn't any clear build on that maybe this is not a guy that is really worth the reps, right? Because he was occasionally starting for the team. And there were flashes of brilliance. And, if you squint really hard, you could sell yourself on some vision of him being the next Pascal, but really, no, not a chance in hell, right? So I think at some point you do have to pull the plug on things faster. And I think this is one lesson the Raptors have really taken to heart. Because if you've been looking at this Dennis Schroeder thing last year, it was quick. It was quick. It was not a prolonged audition for Dennis Schroeder. And you can say he wanted out or, they wanted to tank or whatever. But I think his bridges were burned. Like he was cooked here. There was nothing salvaging it. And they'd wanted him for a while. It's not like some castaway that they didn't like or he had to take him back in a trade. Like Goran Dragic. No, they went out and they really sought this guy. They wanted him to sort of shepherd the ship for them in the absence of Fred VanVleet. And they just pulled the plug on him pretty quickly. So I thought that that was a sign of growth. And hopefully they'll show enough patience with these young players like Grady and Jacoby and, you know, Jonathan Mobo, Yuri Shamshay, potentially Christian Koloko if he comes back. All these young kids, right? But none of them are Scotty Barnes. None of them are on that level. Davion Mitchell, Ochai Abaji, all of them, right? So regardless of your personal affiliation or whatever, it's like the Jordan Noir thing. Half a season audition didn't work out, didn't look great. Peace, right? There's no need to keep bringing it back. There's no need to keep giving chances, right? I think it's just things are true until they're not. And when you have more data, right, and you have a little bit more time to evaluate that person every single day, I think you just need to go for it. Okay, progress is linear, results are not. Hmm. They always say, and I have said probably 100 times, progress is not linear. Progress is not linear. I tell you, I'm 36 years old, and I have found that progress is actually quite linear. It's the results by which we measure progress that are not linear. So, for instance, you want to become a great writer, write every single day, right? You're going to write every single day. And every single day you're going to read and every year you're going to submit what you wrote to a publication and every year you're going to get a rejection. And then one year you're going to get like a $200,000 check and you're going to be told that you're a New York Times bestseller. And the illusion in that moment is going to be that progress was not linear. But was it not? You know, like like when you let's just say for instance, success is 96, right? Or success is 99. Well, your path from 10 to 99 can be one a year, sorry, one every month. And you can go month by month by month, and you're not going to reap any of the rewards of any of that progress until you clip that mark. So it's going to feel like progress is nonlinear, but I disagree. I think progress is quite linear. And I think we're seeing this with Scotty Barnes, right? So, for instance, saw stagnation in year two. I saw a player who was just very different. That to me, like I think he was a better player in year two. The numbers did not show that. The percentages did not show that. There's a lot of metrics that would argue that he was worse. But I would say that if you fundamentally change the type of player you're trying to be, you're going to struggle. But a lot of people took that to mean that he got worse. And I disagree with the premise. He did not get worse. He certainly did not get worse. He got better. There were a lot of things that he was better at. And again, if this year, for instance, Yuri Shamshay is just to use Yurish as a great example because he's 18 years old. Let's just say he's playing in the 905 and he gets spot minutes, right? And he's basically a garbage guy, right? And let's just say he musters up 200 minutes on the year and he doesn't take a single three. And in those 200 minutes, he shoots like 68% because everything's running, dunking on third stringers. But then the next year, right, he gets a rotation role with the Raptors. And let's just say those percentages plummet from 67 to like 46. So he takes a 21% dip in his percentages, but now he's taking a whole bunch of threes and he's doing against actual rotation players and he's doing it on a much larger sample size. Did he regress? Hell no, he didn't regress. But you would probably have a bunch of people saying, well, how come he's shooting 21% worse? Why does he not get better? Is he not working hard? And I can almost guarantee you that that article will be written by Doug Smith. My point is, when you try new things, you fail in different ways. So Yeah, I think this could be probably a motivational note for people who are trying new things. You're going to be bad at it for a while, and you're going to be bad in different ways. This one is from a Louis Zatzman article. This is Goodhart's law of measure and target. So basically, what the law suggests, I'm going to paraphrase, is that when the measure of progress becomes the target, then the measure fails to be useful. And so effectively, he used it in reference to Nick Nurse trying to rig the possession battle. The notion was that teams that win the possession battle, I think by 4 or 5 possessions, tend to have good outcomes, as in they win games. But of course, the data suggests that those teams are winning the possession battle as a result of their defense, right? They're really good defensively, or maybe they're just really competent offensively and they're just really talented. And so they're doing that. So when you try to rig the same result, it kind of misses the point, right? It's kind of like the forest in the trees. So maybe I'm not doing the greatest job of explaining it, but what I'm trying to say is that just because something is working, like say for instance, right now, the example that's been used was assists. Are assists a great barometer of good offense? Yes, in theory, great offenses tend to flow, right? But it's perfectly possible to rig an offense or rig your play style so that no one is able to shoot without an assist. In which case, you can lead the league in assists and be the worst team in the league offensively. So it's possible to have the worst offense and lead the league in assists. It's perfectly possible. It's also possible, for instance, to lead the league in three pointers attempted and be the worst 3-point shooting team. So I think that this is worth noting. I think this is also a good place to talk about the Vision 6-9 thing. Finally, my favorite quote, probably of all time. When people show you who they are, believe them, right? Now, earlier we talked about bad apples, right? What we didn't talk about enough were positive disruptors, right? So people who have good ideas, the right mentality, maybe they're just good people, but they ruffle some feathers. They're prickly, right? But they have the right idea. They want to win, but they have a different idea of how to win. And I think Kyle Lowry is a great example of a prickly peach, but no one's ever accused Kyle Lowry of not caring about winning. They accused him of being difficult. They accused him of not being very agreeable. But not everyone who's disagreeable is a bad apple. So I think that it's important that, when people look at Scotty Barnes' body language and saying, why is he yelling at so and so? And why is he walking off the court? That Scotty's a positive disruptor. In my opinion, he's a positive disruptor. I've always found this to be true that he's sort of someone who marches to the beat of his own drum. And in the end, ultimately, all this guy cares about is winning. He's never going to put his contract over winning. He's never going to put his stats over winning. So he's pretty much aligned with the right shit. And I think that in a lot of ways, Scotty has always reminded me of Kyle Lowry in that way. It's not because he has some horrible relationship with coaches or whatever. I just think that he has that sort of win at all costs, bulldog mentality. And I think that if people give it a chance, they're really, really going to like what the Toronto Raptors look like under his leadership. Like Kyle, however, I think it took Scotty a few years to find his voice and to find his place as a leader, right? And just because you're a top 5 pick doesn't mean that that mental component of leadership comes right away. Didn't come right away for Lowry. I think where I really saw Lowry become like a great leader probably was when he was 28 or 29 years old. So if Scotty figures it out by the time he's 23, which he seems to right now really be figuring it out, he's already 5 years ahead of the curve. So I just think that, you know, I've seen enough of Scotty at this point to know that this is a guy who cares about the right stuff. And this is exactly the type of player that I would want to build a winning organization around. And you know what? Warts and all, I feel the same way about Emmanuel Quickly. I feel the same way about RJ Barrett. Never known any of these guys to care about anything other than the main thing. They keep the main thing, and the main thing is winning. So ultimately, I think this is a lesson that the Raptors can take to heart. And yeah, that's that. Okay, let's get to the mailbag. Okay. Okay, we got to go through this mailbag real quick. Okay, give me one sec here. So, also to those of you who have been missing the lives a little bit, I will be on Players Choice, the panel tomorrow at 11 a.m. So make sure to check it out there. And so we got one question. Given the current roster for the upcoming season, where do you rank? Wait, what the hell? Okay, so Royce Huncho saying, where do you rank Vince Carter all time? Is he top 75? Yes. Yes, he is. Susan saying, why is there no news about Christian Coloco? That's a really good question. I would assume that there will be a training camp invite or something prior to training camp because Bruno Fernando's contract for about 2.4 million, if I'm not mistaken, becomes guaranteed on the first day of the season. So it is pretty much a camp deal. And I know that he's been with the team and he's been with Emmanuel Quigley and stuff, and there's some interest in him. But of course, we don't rule out the possibility of a trade, a 2-for-1 type of trade, in which that would free up the roster spot for Bruno Fernando. But Christian Coloco has been posting a ton of videos of him running up and down the court, playing pickup, etc. So if he's cleared, I cannot understand if he's medically cleared why the Raptors wouldn't be A, his preferred choice, and B, why the Raptors would let this slip. There's no way that the Toronto Raptors, again, in my opinion, value Bruno Fernando over Christian Coloco. So I think it's just a matter of time. Kemp says, could Darko win us a championship, or do you think they will pivot to a more nurse-like coach later? So personally, kind of resent the I kind of resent this notion that Nick Nurse is a better coach than Darko Rajakovic. I understand where it comes from because Nurse is considered a more of a tactician or whatever, but I think y'all really, really overrate boxing one, man. Darko's a smart coach. Like, he's a really smart coach. He has the ability to adapt. But of course, if he's not the guy who's going to take you to the promised land, one thing I'm sure of, he'll have a couple of cracks at it, right? I hope. It's not like I liken him to Mark Jackson. We will never know if Mark Jackson, sans the political stuff, minus the religious stuff, minus the interpersonal stuff, minus Joe Lacob hating him. We don't know if, what he did. We don't know if that could have led to a championship. Certainly, Steve Kerr is taking a lot of strays for how he is coaching, Team USA this summer. So, look, I'm not here to say, but the team grew under Mark Jackson, right? They got a lot of their swagger, a lot of their identity, a lot of their, functionality as a unit, like their chemistry as a three-man, the dynasty that was really propelled by those three players. A lot of that came with him. And so, I think Darko is very similar to Mark Jackson. You know, Smart guy, understands players, understands human beings, and with some experience at a head coaching level in the NBA, hopefully we will see better rotations. But again, how do you judge it right now? If rotations are being created to develop, right? If you're putting Scotty with these lineups to lose minutes to force, development, how are you supposed to say what he would do if there was a championship on the line? You really can't know until that time. So I would say give it time. Kasia saying, do you think the Raptors could still use Landry Shamet? I'm off Landry Shamet. Which matchups? Okay, so Roy's saying, which matchups are you excited for Scotty this season? For me, it's Scotty versus Greek Freak. I'm excited for the matchup against Pascal. I am excited for the matchup against Giannis. I am excited for the matchup against Kevin Durant, LeBron James. So some of the usual suspects, but I am perhaps most excited about his matchups against Cade Cunningham and Paolo Banchero because I cannot wait for him to clear up those conversations. I would also really like to see Scotty completely dust the Boston Celtics. Michael Carter saying, would you be open to trading for an established role player star starter if we are 500 at the deadline. Bro, if we are 500 at the deadline, we better trade for that because given the way the season is starting, like you absolutely need to factor in that if you are 500 at the deadline, you have a chance at a 50-win season, given how soft the schedule is. So yes, and given how much I know that the Toronto Raptors internally value playoff experience, yes, if that is in fact the case, the Toronto Raptors have 5 draft picks over the next 2 drafts. Exactly 5, right? They have their first rounder this year. They have multiple first rounders the next year, their own and Indiana's top 4 protected. They have Portland's second round pick this year, and they have their own second round pick in 2026. If all draft picks are as high as I think they're going to be, yeah, they could trade one of those potentially in an expiring contract and get some immediate help. Another contract. Another comment from Kasia saying, "Do you think Yorish will get some serious run with Scotty? His speed with Scotty, 5 exclamation marks." I share your excitement on the 5 exclamation marks. I think Scotty's gonna love him. I really do. And Yorish is down in Miami right now, and so is Scotty. So hopefully they're having some time to work with each other. Okay, let's see here. Connor saying, who would be the best free agent addition to this team next summer come 2025, 2026? I'm so sorry. I should have looked at this before. I don't remember off the top of my head who has the best free agent or who's even available. Maybe that's something to pursue. But I will tell you that the Raptors cap sheet looks brilliant going into the next few years because they have Emmanuel quickly locked up at 32.5. And I was just looking at some of the math on where contracts and where the TV deal is going to spike this cap. And it seems, at least looking at it, that we're going to be looking at a $200 million cap really soon. At which point, naturally, if Scotty does qualify for the Supermax, happy for him. Kind of sucks for the Raptors. It's going to, hamper, it's gonna complicate things a little bit. And if RJ Barrett's extension kicks in, say next summer, if RJ qualifies for an extension, I think he mentioned something about this offseason, like he wants to extend with the Raptors. So if his extension is reasonable, then it's very possible that the Raptors will be in a really good place, especially relative to where other teams are going to be. Because again, teams like Orlando are signing multiple players to max deals, like Franz and Paolo, right? Both are going to be max players. I don't think either player is better than Scotty Barnes. So really, you just need Manuel quickly to work out, and then you need some tradable contracts. I think you'll be able to add a second max player to this. So could be interesting. Brandon Ingram just does not necessarily appeal to me, but something on that talent level, if you are really good and if Scotty's a real superstar this year, yeah, it could make some sense. There is. Do you think Bruno will be with the team this season? Not gonna lie, he's been working hard. I'm assuming you mean Bruno Fernando. And honestly, if Christian Coloco is not cleared, or if Christian Coloco signs elsewhere, yeah, I expect Bruno Fernando to be with the team. I'm not necessarily sure how much you could bank on him getting rotation minutes, but it is something that you don't really have on this team in his absence. And I think it would be a good it's probably a good thing to have for Ulrich as well. Tien Zro saying Claxton or Coloco considering price and potential. Man, I would say Coloco. And the only reason I say that is not because I think Christian Coloco is a better player than Nick Claxton. Nick Claxton's awesome. I just think at 25, I think Clax signed for 25 million a year. That's a far cry from what Coloco will get. Coloco's a minimum player right now. If Christian works out, the other cool thing about the Toronto Raptors is they have all these players that are not likely to blow up. So they could be secured to like pretty decent deals. Like Urish is a two-way player right now, right? Could you convert him? Possibly. Could you let the contract run out and then give him an extension? Possibly. The point is, there's a chance that you get one of those Fred VanVleet type of value deals where you have a player who, then goes, right? And they end up like blowing up midway through the discount contract. So hopefully, hopefully you'll have that situation with Ulrich or Jonathan Mobo or one of those guys. As much as I want these guys to get paid, I want the Raptors to be good. So yeah. Anyways, that's Vegan Grass saying, where's he reading the questions from? I am reading them from Instagram on my phone. Okay. All right. Make sure to hit like on your way out. We are still on track to do that interview with Eric tomorrow. And then we're going to do an interview with Catherine this weekend. Everything got pushed. People got sick. People were traveling. So it's been interesting. I'm really thinking about it. It's like been almost like a 1 month break from content, from absolute content for me. So I'm very ready for the year to start. And yeah, I'm feeling good. I hope y'all are feeling good about the Toronto Raptors. Make sure to like, comment, let me know what you're looking forward to most this year, or which of these rules or lessons resonated most with you. All right. Tariq saying predict the Raptors record this season. 32-50. That's if they tear it down. If they don't tear it down, I'd say 36 wins. There was a tier list on the Hoop Collective podcast, and they put the Raptors in the play-in sort of conversation with Chicago and Atlanta, and I think that's pretty fair. But I think the Raptors will be proactive, and they'll probably tank it. But yeah, Andrew saying you deserve the break. Crazy to think you've only missed one game last year. Yes, and it bothers me and haunts my dreams to this very day. It was against Atlanta, right? That's yeah. All right. Talk to y'all later. Bye.